Now then, as I said earlier, we don't get to see the Lava Ridge gym battle. Not that we needed to. It would have been nice to get in on the training sessions with Skarmory before it became tame enough to ride, but that's a story for another time. Steven's journey picks up shortly after that, where he rides Skarmory across the sea to Moss Deep. Instead of landing in the city, Steven's curious gaze is drawn, once again, to a cave just north of civilization. It raises his itch for spelunking, and he eagerly dives into exploration. After a bit of time, he winds up literally bumping into his new rival, Wallace. The latter is there for Spheal training, but with the day almost over, he was just on his way out. After some rather one-sided banter, Wallace reluctantly leads Steven to the ice caverns of Shoal Cave. Wallace is at his worst at this point in the story. He's held a bad impression of Steven ever since the latter's Auron went barking at his mentor, and Steven stared on for longer than was polite. And this time around, Steven bumbled into him after running away from some bats. Without Juan around to curb his sass, Wallace goes out of his way to berate Steven over every little thing, becoming a truly insufferable asshole. Only Steven's vast patience and dogged eagerness to see the ice caves prevents him from snapping on his pompous companion. Whether you found their exchange fascinating drama or obnoxious bickering, I can tell you one thing: it was very easy to voice act. Sometimes I have to feel a character out for a bit before I can attempt a fitting tone, and authors don't always make it simple. Well, it was this time. The Spheal in training gets loose and runs off, forcing the two boys to chase after it while the tide starts rolling in. Events quickly snowball into full-blown disaster, all of which might have been avoided if Wallace had just recalled Spheal into its Pokeball. Oh, wait. What's this? How about that? Wolflin put in a throwaway line about Master Juan not giving Wallace the ball for it. Okay, but why would Juan withhold it? All we've done here is trade one question for another, and at most kick that can down the road. But after going through it multiple times, I've never found the answer in text. I wouldn't have cared so much if it didn't have to do with the episode's pivotal plot driver, butterfly effect and all that. Perhaps Wolflin had a perfectly justifiable answer in his mind, or other readers have come up with their own headcanon that explained it, but it's the author's job to account for unreasonable events and behavior without writing themselves into a corner. That's the unspoken contract between readers and writers of fiction. The reader agrees to invest attention while suspending his disbelief. The writer, in turn, sticks as true as he can to his promised themes, while anchoring his fiction in real-world expectations. It's okay if something weird happens, as long as it receives eventual rectification. 99 times out of 100, Wolflin does this. That's why I can be lulled and entranced by his story. But it's also why I'm jerked awake the few times he doesn't. The same might be said about my reading, incidentally, whenever my tone is off, or I say facilities instead of faculties, or Devon rather than Devon if that was right, or if my pauses are too short. I, who critique, am myself worthy of criticism, and I will take it if I deserve it. Just thought I'd mention that. This episode is designed after the trope where hardship brings people together. The cave starts to fill with freezing water, some boulders fall from the ceiling, the boys find themselves in a race against time, all that good stuff. Once again, it's a little too convenient that the rocks should fall right between the boys at such a specific moment, but it makes for a suitable challenge. Something that could conceivably happen in an ever-shifting cave, but also within a Pokemon's power to overcome. Steven's fossils evolve to clear the task, the trainers escape with their lives, and all's well that ends well. That said, I've never cared much for stories about man versus nature. The conflict isn't personal. I'm much more enthralled when the two sides are actively fighting with intent, using every advantage at their disposal. The more intelligence displayed, the better. It's why I'm a Pokemon fan. Steven and Wallace part in Moss Deep Gym with something that's not quite mutual respect, but better than anything they've shown for each other until now. As thanks for his help, Steven gives Wallace the water stone he found after their first encounter, and promises to meet him in Setopolis Gym. In the meantime, he must face Lisa and Tate's parents to earn his 6th badge. They prove to be a formidable pair, and though Steven comes out the winner, it takes most of his Pokemon team to beat just 2 of theirs. Let's talk about the rules of the Pokemon universe for a little bit, because they're inconsistent depending on which reality you're dealing with. Therefore, the fan author is often made to pick and choose. Wolflin leaned more on the games than the anime, in that he allowed the challenger, Steven, a full team against whatever limited number the gym leaders had. Likewise, Steven didn't have to compete in a tournament like Ash did, but simply faced the Elite Four after earning his badges. I know that's still a Herculean effort, but not as hard as the former. Now, the anime logic did come into play when it came to such things as, say, a psychic attack directing the path of a flamethrower, or choosing gym challenges in your own preferred order, since in this world, there's a team for every level. Wait, actually, that was kind of a thing in Pokemon Stadium. Well, anyway, the way Wolflin went about it seemed reasonable to me overall, given the relative consistency. The important thing is to stick to pre-established world building. I've seen some Pokemon fans rage at others for things as petty as role-playing their trainers listening to modern songs while traveling. Why? Because the Pokemon world isn't our world. These idiots seem to forget that the Pokemon world contains America, see Lieutenant Surge, Santa Claus, Christianity, Japanese Goza no Okurubi festivals, the writings of William Shakespeare, and a laundry list of other canonical commitments. Because I can point to an established pattern, I'm cool with it. What I'm not okay with is when the fundamental rules are broken for the sake of drama, particularly to make Pikachu look good. Broxonix, Blaine's Rhydon, I'm looking at you. So, back to the story, Steven realizes that the difficulty curve is sharply rising, and his team's not ready for the Setopolis Gym as they are. He flies to Meteor Falls for some training, and discovers that a trainer's been living in the upper area. It's a guy named Garrett, who may be better identified as Aron's previous trainer. What starts as a friendly battle quickly becomes a grudge match, when Steven realizes that Garrett abandoned Aron for a better one. On its face, this isn't really an act of evil. Pokemon are not born equal. Some are blessed with better genes, which in-game mechanics qualify as IVs, individual values. It takes time and effort to raise any Pokemon, so competitive trainers will select only the best to devote themselves to. It's a standard practice, written right there in the first line of the Pokemon theme song. Garrett's sin was that he domesticated Aron for 6 full months, had a connection established, and then cut it off for a better Aron. By my somewhat cheeky speculation, Steven probably encountered Aron about 2 days after abandonment. In other words, in about the same time frame as Steven's entire journey to this point, Garrett had that Aron, and he ditched it for a better one. Where was that one from? Victory Road? It wasn't even shiny. Forget callousness for a moment. I'm appalled about all that wasted training effort. What rational trainer has the time and resources to go making such an inefficient decision? This is, unfortunately, a case of style over substance, however well-intentioned, and it broke my suspension of disbelief, for a little while. As a trainer, Garrett is on pretty close level to Steven. Considering he had a 6-month lead on our hero, one would have expected the match to be more lopsided. Garrett is portrayed as a competent trainer, so the implication here is that Steven's been doing something special to catch up. Presumably loving his Pokemans more? The chapter ends with his victory, and I think this event helps him solidify his calling as a trainer. Up until now, I couldn't really say that Steven's been driven by anything extraordinary, just curiosity for the world around him, and curiosity about his therapy dog's hidden potential. He's had no real reason to become strong, no ideal to fight for or fight against. It's why I began this review with the question of Steven's motivation. Just avoiding a desk job at his dad's company seems an inadequate reason for becoming champion. In Dragonus Bahamut's fic, Everything Changes, Ash had some of his Pokemon held hostage by Team Rocket, and he had to beat the League if he ever wanted to see them again. Now that's a motivation. I'm still not sold on where his drive comes from, but if I had to pick a moment of clarity, it would have been here. Garrett considered his Auron useless, and that pissed Steven off. He now had something to prove. Auron, now Aggron, wasn't just useful, but better in Steven's hands than Garrett's. Steven needed to make all his Pokemon better, the best, to show people such as Roxanne, Wallace, and his father what he could do, what they all could do. It's the same reason why, in the real world, we show off our Pokemans to other people on our handheld systems. We're proud of our teams, and if anyone thinks theirs are better, we fight them over it. Bottom line, Steven's finally starting to become truly powerful.